This particular video we are going to talk about tuple. Okay, so we have one data structure called tuple in Python. So what this tuple exactly? What are the differences between tuple data structure and list data structure in Python? So everything we are going to discuss in this particular video. Hi, this is Rajendra and we'll be discussing on this feature now. So we already discussed about the list, and I'll share the list video link in a description box. So let's talk about the tuple. So tuple is a immutable data structure, right? So tuple is a immutable data structure. It has same property like list, like it can have heterogeneous elements, right? It can have a heterogeneous elements. That means you can store a constant, string, a list, tuple, dictionary, all the different types of data you can put it under tuple. Okay, but once you put it, you cannot modify it. Okay, and that's why we call this as a immutable data structure, right? So let's see how it looks like. So basically, if you want to create a tuple, we use function like bracket, right? So this is how you can create a tuple. So let me just create a variable called mytuple. So this statement will create an empty tuple, right? So if you see the type of this mytuple, so you can see here the type of variable is tuple, right? So now this is one way of creating an empty tuple. You can also create an empty tuple by using a tuple function. So we have one built-in function called tuple. So this will also help us to create a tuple, empty tuple, right? So if you see again a type of a tuple, you can see here it's again a tuple, right? So these are the two ways to create a tuple. Now how to create or how to create a tuple with elements. So let's do that. So we can embed multiple elements in a one go, something like this. Okay, even you can have a strings as well. That's perfectly fine because this is a collection of heterogeneous elements. So once you create it, this is perfectly fine. If you want to access it, we already discussed about the looping statement like for. So those we can use it for accessing. So for x in my tuple, so this will one by one it will take one element from the tuple, assign it to x, and then we can just print that variable of x. Okay, so if you run it, we got individual element of the tuple. Even you can do the indexing as well, right? So if I just do my tuple of 0, you can see we are getting the element here. Okay, but if you try to modify, this is something not allowed, right? So if I just do my tuple of 0 equal to, let's say, 100, if I'm just trying to change the value of 0th element from 1 to 100, so if I run it, you can see we'll get the error, tuple object does not support item assignment. What does that mean? That means tuple is immutable, you cannot modify, right? Now we have seen some built-in functions like dir, help, right? So dir function will help us to get what all the methods that are supported for the tuple object, right? So if you just apply to the tuple variable, you will see there are only two methods, count and index. Why so? Because tuple is immutable. Once you create tuple, you cannot modify anything. Okay, and that's the reason tuple object supports only two methods. That means one is count, that will help us to count any specific element in that tuple, and then if you want to get an index of that element, index method you can use it, right? So for example, this is our tuple, right? This is our tuple, and now if you want to see how many times one is there, so you can do my tuple dot count. Okay, let's check the count of 2, how many times 2 is there in that tuple. So it is only one time, that's why it is getting, right? So if you want to get the index of that, that is also possible. You can use the index method, and index of 2, what is the index of 2? It is the index of 2 is 1. Okay, so it's starting from 0th index, so it is available at index 1, right? So only these two method tuple supports. Okay, so now if you see the how it is means it is a collection of heterogeneous element, only thing it is immutable. So what is the difference between list and tuple? That is something we need to understand first. So list versus tuple, that is what we are going to discuss now, and this is very important to understand because these two are very important data structures, right? So first difference I would say here to understand, everybody to understand, is I'll write a list first and then tuple second. Okay, so list is a mutable. Okay, list is mutable. Here tuple is immutable. That means once you create a list, you can modify elements anytime, but once you create tuple, you cannot modify the elements. Okay, so that is the first difference and very important difference we have. Now the next difference is as list is mutable, so definitely we can do the insert delete operation on, right? So that's the reason it's a very time consuming operation, because let's say if you insert any element in the list, obviously it has to shift other elements to the next memory location. Okay, so it's a very time consuming. Okay, so this data structure, list data structure, is time consuming versus tuple is very fast, right? So while choosing which particular data structure we have to use, whether it's a tuple or list, we need to first understand the use case. Okay, we need to first understand the use case, where you need to understand whether once you have a data, whether that data is going to change frequently or that will be there throughout your program. Okay, if it is going to change frequently, go ahead with a list. If it is going to remain as is throughout the program, then it's always better to use tuple, because that will improvise the performance of your program, right? So this is the second very important difference. The third one is if you want to do insert delete kind of operation, that is where you should prefer list. Okay, but if you want to just access the element, okay, if you want to just access elements, that is where tuple should be preferred, right? Now, what is the next difference is, as we need to do the insert delete kind of operation in a list, so internally list object will consume more memory. Okay, so it's a very memory consuming, so consume more memory. So your list object will consume lot of memory from the your address space. Okay, but your tuple is immutable, so it will use very less memory. So this is another difference that we should understand. Now the next important thing is, now as list is mutable, we can do a lot of things. Okay, so that's why you must have observed there are a lot of functions available in the list object, like you can add, extend, append, delete, remove, pop. There are a lot of built-in functions are available, a lot of built-in functions available in list. Okay, versus for a tuple, okay, very less built-in functions. Built-in functions, so where these built-in functions will be helpful if you want to do some operations on the data that is available. Okay, so list provides a lot of functions, so that will make the developers life easy. But if you want to work with a tuple, we have a very less functions there, right? So this is another difference that we have. And now the very important, and that will decide whether we should go ahead with a list and tuple, is, so basically now let's say there are multiple functions you have and you are passing your data from one function to another function, right? So if you pass the list, okay, if you pass the list to any other function, there are high chances that accidentally your data might get changed. Okay, your data might get changed, like let's say you don't want to make your data to be changed, and if you still use the list, okay, and if that data get accidentally changed, so you will find some undefined behavior, right? But in case of a tuple, if you are using a tuple and if you pass that tuple to any other function, okay, so first of all tuple will not allow the data change, so there is no question of accidentally changing the data. So this is very important. So this will help us to decide whether for this either we should use list or tuple, right? So data might change in called function. Okay, that is what can happen in the list, but in a tuple that is not the case. Okay, tuple will not allow to change the data, right? So these are very important changes we need to first understand. Okay, along with understanding the data structures like list and tuple, right? So I hope everyone understood the differences between list and tuple. Okay, if you have any question, just drop a comment, and don't forget to like, share and subscribe the channel. Thank you everyone.